Welcome everybody. My name is Dr. Sandra Manickam, and I'm an assistant professor at the Department of History at Erasmus University of Rotterdam. Today what I'll be doing is giving you a little bit of a taste of what we do here at Erasmus and how it is that we approach history. And what I'll be doing today is giving you a sample lecture of one of the first few classes that you will be having to take, that you will have to take at our program. And the class is called Heuristic Skills and Sources. This is a class that will teach you the skills that you need in order to make, to conduct research. And it's also a class that will teach you, hopefully, what are some of the issues at stake when you are a history student, when you are doing history professionally, and some of the things that you need to keep in mind while you are studying history. So today's lecture is the second lecture in a series of 4 lectures. And today we'll be talking about evidence, proof, and secondary sources. What do we try and do in this class, in Heuristic Skills and Sources? Heuristic skills are the ways in which you try and search for and collate source material in historical and archaeological research, and the rules or methods of how to do this. One of the main things that we try and teach you is to learn how to find sources in order to write history, but also how to use them in an intelligent way. So as we say here on the right-hand side, to learn how to write according to the rules of the profession is also a heuristic skill. It's a skill that you will definitely need for this study. You also need to learn to use the digital tools for historical research. And increasingly now, a lot of our work as historians is done with digital media such as archives that are online, or video, or photography, whatever. And what we hope that you will do with all of this is to put this together to write awesome papers that we as lecturers want to read all day long, and that hopefully will change the world, or at least change somebody's mind, or to tell us what is going on in your mind. So that's what we want to accomplish here. And this is the first step in trying to get to that stage. This is an overview of what it is that we had done the week before and what it is that you should have already done by now. In conjunction with this course, you will have to pick a source in which you will be researching for the whole semester. You would have gone to the Royal Library in The Hague. That is part of an excursion that you will take. You have installed Zotero, which is an online referencing and bibliographical software. What you should already know by now is what a primary source is, how to reference your primary and some secondary sources according to Chicago Manual of Style, and this is a style that we in history use, how to look for tertiary sources and what these are, and that we are marking according to the 0.6 rule if your writing is not up to standard. And this is something that we urge you to pay attention to in this class, so that hopefully this will teach you to pay attention to it for subsequent classes as well. The reading that is required for today is in your textbook, and this is Research Methods in History, chapters 10 and 11. The topics for today are finding useful material, how you can do this, referencing, what secondary sources are, and what historiographical debates are. The objectives of today's class are to understand what evidence is and what role it plays in forming your arguments. You need to learn how to find secondary source material, and you also need to understand why it is that we use referencing. Why are we so hung up on footnotes and bibliographies? Why do we need this? I'm going to be using a few examples. The main ones will be a movie that came out in 2016 called Denial, about Holocaust Denial, and also about comfort women during the Second World War in Asia and sexual slavery. The last, of course, is that you should be thinking about your own source that you have picked by now in order to reflect on some of these issues. Now, this is something that we like to impress upon our new undergraduates. A lot of you come and join the history program and join the history department because you have something to say, because you're intelligent people, and because you have a curiosity about the world. But what we often find is that there are a lot of opinions going around, right? You're very good, perhaps, in expressing an opinion, and this is fine, this is really good. But what we want to see in our history program, and what we believe, is that anybody can have an opinion, You can walk into the street. You can ask anybody for their opinion about something and they will give it to you. But that is different from an academic sphere. And what we want here is academically researched opinions. And these two things can be quite different, and this is where this class will teach you how to form and formulate the latter. One of the main examples that we will use is a movie called Denial, which was released in 2016 and directed by Mick Jackson. Now, this was a movie which I watched on a plane, and I didn't necessarily hear anything about it, but when I watched it, I thought this is great. This is a great film in order to talk about evidence specifically. And if you are interested, you can watch the full trailer on YouTube. And there's also a trailer which highlights one specific aspect of the film and an exchange between the defendant and a lawyer, where the issue of evidence came up. And if you're not really sure about what this is about, Denial is about a Holocaust denialist in the UK, and another scholar who had disagreed with his views, and this case came forth to the courts in the UK. And this is a film about this court case. Now, what is evidence? There are many kinds of things that we can say that can constitute evidence, and one of the ways that we can understand this is according to the OED, or as we say, Oxford English Dictionary. Evidence is grounds for belief, facts or observations adduced in support of a conclusion or statement, or the available body of information indicating whether an opinion or proposition is true or valid. In other words, this is usually what we consider to be proof. Okay, so proof and evidence are often used interchangeably. But there are certain kinds of rules in our profession, in the historical profession, when it comes to evidence. What do we do? What kind of evidence do we search? Do we only search for evidence or proof which supports our point of view? Do we only search for evidence in one place and listen to one source? Is that enough? Do we disregard evidence from sources or from things that support another point of view? And this is rather of leading questions, and of course the answer to all of these is that no, we should not only search for evidence that supports our point of view. We need to search broadly for all kinds of evidence that might be out there, and we need to take into consideration and weigh up evidence that might support a point of view which we do not have. And this is part and parcel of conducting research and conducting meaningful research, right? Research that will last the test, that will stand the test of time. Research that will communicate your findings as something that might be original and unique and well thought through to other scholars. Now, the 5 general goals of research, and this is an adaptation from Chicago Manual Style, is to ask a question worth asking. And in layman's terms, what we usually try and ask students is to say, so what? Why should we care about the research question that you are interested in? You need to find an answer that you can support with good reasons, your argument. And the third step, and this is a step that we are focusing on today, is that you need to find reliable evidence to support your reasons. And this entails finding available sources, cataloging and ordering them so that you have a general overview of what the material is out there that talks about your topic. Now, usually evidence falls into 3 categories: primary, secondary, and tertiary. In previous weeks, we have talked about other kinds of evidence, but today we'll be talking about primary evidence. And primary evidence and primary sources are artifacts, documents, photographs, books, etc., that were created at the time the event occurred. Now, this is a kind of simplistic way of understanding primary sources. We'll try and complicate that as we go on in this course. Primary evidence is usually understood to be a first-hand account or evidence of an event, idea, time you are researching. That's what we usually call primary evidence. Now, secondary and tertiary evidence are of a slightly different kind. In terms of secondary sources, generally they are accounts written after the fact with the benefit of hindsight. So these are interpretations and evaluations of primary sources. They can also be commentary on and discussion of evidence. However, this is kind of a gray area. what some people define as a secondary source, others will define as a tertiary source, and we'll talk about this soon, or even a primary source. So the context of what you are researching on, what you're researching is everything. When it comes to tertiary sources, these are sources that are used to organize and locate secondary and primary sources. They usually consist of information which is a distillation and a collection of primary and secondary sources. Now, one of the things that we usually do as historians is collect all kinds of primary and secondary sources. And the way in which that we collect these, the way in which we sift through them and choose them, is usually dependent on what it is that we're trying to show. Hence, the kind of responsibility that we hold as historians is a very, very heavy one. We need to be fair in looking at all the evidence. We also need to use our judgments when it comes to weighing them up. But we also need to consider viewpoints which are not necessarily ones that we might agree with. And this is a case in point when it comes to talking about the movie Denial. So there was a lot of evidence that had been brought forward by historians and other scholars about the fact of there being a Holocaust, the fact of there being concentration camps that were meant to murder, among others, people of Jewish descent. Now, this is from a scholarly book, and the way in which the issue is put forward when it comes to Holocaust denials is put like this by the scholar by the name of Robert Jan Pelt. The bedrock of Irving's claim, and Irving is the scholar who is the subject of the movie, was his insistence that the Germans had not built extermination camps to kill Jews. Irving justified this assertion by reference to one particular source by Fred Leuchter, that there had been no homicidal gas chambers in Auschwitz. Lipstadt, who is the scholar who disproves of Irving's claims, had argued that Irving betrayed his vocation as a historian when he accepted Leuchter's conclusions without considering the massive amounts of evidence that pointed to the existence and operation of the gas chambers in Auschwitz. And this is the heart of why evidence is so important, of why it is that historians, we want to cast a wide net when it comes to evidence, so that we can say that we've done our homework. We've looked at all the available evidence as far as we understood that as being available to us, and that our judgments and our arguments are based on the available evidence that is there. Now, how is it that we actually show that we have done all of this work? This is the main question. And this is where the ubiquitous footnote comes in. So historians have a love-hate relationship with the footnote. It's one of the things that defines our profession in the sense that we like copious footnotes. At the same time, it is a very difficult kind of habit to get into, especially for young historians like yourselves. In the book, The Footnote, A Curious History, the author says, the historian must perform two tasks. One, they must examine all the sources relevant to the solution of a problem. And two, they need to construct a new narrative or argument from them. Now, the footnote proves that both tasks have been carried out, and it proves it in a way that doesn't necessarily take up so much space. The footnote, and you will see how you can do this by inserting something in Microsoft Word called a reference and then a footnote, identifies the work, and this is your essays, your papers, as the creation of a professional, which is not random, but part of modern science. The text persuades, the footnotes or notes prove. Now, this is also, in a sense, a kind of very straightforward representation of the footnote here. It has problematic assumptions that we won't necessarily question now, that everything can be footnoted. But for now, this is part of the good practices or best practices that we hope that you will instill, that you will have to follow in your papers.